So I was debating whether I was going to make this video or not, but I decided, why not? There's only a few people that actually watch it. Anyways, anywho, so I wanted to talk about today um, that for Black people, Black Americans, we need to really research your history, man. Research your personal history, your personal human history, your personal family history, because everything you're being told about history in general is a lie. Like the stuff that we've learned in school is a lie. It's not the actual truth. There was an agenda for that, and it served its purpose. Sorry, my TV's acting crazy. And it's time that we start understanding reality. So, when I say Black Americans, I'm impert for the subject. I see a lot of talk about slavery and what happened with slavery and all this and that. And I'm still along the terms of that we have not been taught or we have not been told the actual what happened with slavery is accurate. And you cannot base what you know about slavery on Hollywood movies. And I think that's where a lot of young Black people are basing a lot of their knowledge about slavery from Hollywood and movies, and it was just only Black people. That's not the truth. They never tell you the complete truth. Like, I have documented history of other races in my family that were in slavery, which makes me believe that slavery was not about race. It was about if you had money or not. Basically, if you were a Black person and you had money and you were of a certain class, you were not a slave. But you could be a white person or a Native American. And if you did not have money or the money of the system that was working at the time, then you were poor and you had to do what you had to do to survive. So that's what I'm saying. Like, you really, like, Black Americans, we really need to talk to your old people of what happened. If you don't know them, I'm sorry, but find people who have family members who are older and talk to them, especially in your area, because most likely you're probably related anyways. If you have a family that's been in a certain area for a long time, like, most of the people in your area are probably connected. So, with that being said, talk to the old folks, like talk to the grandmas. And a lot of folks, it's just this trendy thing is like, I don't need my family. If they don't like me, then forget them, whatever. That's not what you should do. You need to talk to the old folks. Oh, they don't like me. Well, then screw them. I'm disconnected from them. I'm going to do my own thing. And that's a very youthful thought to think. If they don't like me, then I'll forget them. Well, let me tell you something. Like, family members don't get along. That does not make them not family. They are connected to you, so you need to talk to them. And bygones be bygones. Everybody's got drama in a family, but they still accept each other, and that's the whole point of family, is accepting them even for the stuff that you don't even like. So they don't like you for whatever reason. You didn't do things like they want you to live. That don't disconnect from them. You need to talk to, especially the old folks, because old folks be knowing stuff. And when people fall out, old folks don't talk about stuff. Fortunately for me and my family, I kind of find myself kind of like a historian. So I find a lot of stuff about my family that is very interesting. So personally, for my family, especially when it comes to slavery and the slave trade or whatever, my family, my three times great grandfather, grandfather, he was he was purchased as a slave as a young child from Oklahoma, and my last name is Bible. That's my real name, but it comes from a white family. But on the census, he's not marked as a slave, So, which goes to tell me, like, there was a lot of children. Let's talk about the economy back then in the 1800s. And I tell people that if you are a young man and you're trying to make your way, you either move to the city and you have a technical job, or you're in the country and you are fending for yourself. Okay, so if you are a farmer and you're trying to raise a farm, you either have to have a wife and make sure she has a lot of sons so that you can so you can do your farm, which is going to take some years. So if you don't already have money and you don't have an established farm, what are you going to do in rural America? You can't do anything unless you have a skill. You can go to, urban America, and be an accountant or whatever they were doing back then. But there were so many young people that were not educated, and they fended for themselves. They're gonna live off the land. They're gonna do a farm. That was what you did back then. So, like I said, this doesn't justify slavery because, yeah, slavery in itself is wrong. But in a sense, everything that you know about slavery wasn't roots. And I think that's what people base slavery on, is all these slave movies that we see of white people beating the fuck out of black folks just to get them to do right. And you're like, but yet in history we see why did all these black folks just kind of chill and just like, why did they stay? Because that didn't happen. Yeah, there was discipline, but there was mostly between families. Beating ass, beating your kids, that was a family thing. But when it comes to rural America and you're trying to get a farm and you're a single person and you're not married, or you do get married but you don't have children of your own, you don't have sons, you still have to have a farm. Remember, they don't have a lot of money back then. You're poor. So you're going to buy farmhands. When you say buy farmhands, basically you're buying slaves. People say, well, slavery is wrong. Let me tell you this. Corporations do this to you every day. They buy cheap labor, and that's you. They're buying you. They're buying cheap labor. They give you enough to pay your bills, buy clothes, and buy food. Other than that, you don't have enough money to do enough to make your own business. You only have enough money. If you only have enough money to pay your bills, buy food, and buy clothes, and after that, you ain't got no more money, you're a slave, basically, in today's terms. Back then, they don't call you a slave now, but back then, that's a slave. Because they purchased a person, they took a liability, a person that could die, and they put them under their wing. And they basically gave them food, shelter, and clothing, and said, just work my land and you can live here for free. And that's a horrible way to think of slavery, but basically that's what it was. You can live here if you basically work my land. And a lot of people did it. A lot of people did it. I have an ancestor that did it. But he was a child. He grew up there. So what many people did is they adopted or took into slavery children. And this is how you have a black culture of people in America that don't have a native language, that don't have they can't remember the native culture unless they were just raised around. Louisiana has a very deep culture, and a lot of people in the South have a deep culture, but most black Americans don't have a common language or a common vernacular that we all agree on, because we're all from different areas and different tribes and whatever. And then there are black indigenous people and there's African black people, and there's a mix between that too, so there's a confusion. So it's not all the same. With that being said, the history of black America is not Roots, because Roots, the movie Roots, by Alex Haley, is that his name? Is a fictional story. And it was created to kind of create that black power movement and whatnot. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it creates a narrative that's not actual or factual. I'm not saying that there weren't some black people that got raped, or there weren't some black people that were misused, but I'm saying that there was a system already in place that still is in place today that is still slavery. That people don't see as slavery, but people accept it because it's minimum wage, whatever. You're just doing what you got to do. And you're wondering why black people then didn't try to escape. Some people did because they were treated badly, but not everybody was treated badly. Which is what I'm talking about my family history, because there's documented of that. And so in my family, you know, my great grandfather on the census, when you check the census, he's not put down as a slave. He's put down as a son. So they were using this slave system of getting farmhands, buying young men to work your farm, and basically adopting them as this sense of adoption. Basically, it was an adoption system, and you see white celebrities every day, and they're adopting Africans and stuff, and these Africans have no sense of their culture. Some of them don't. I think Sandra Bullock is one. She's trying to make sure her son knows of his culture, but most celebrities, they just kind of colonize their children. They adopt children from other countries, and they colonize them with. I think that was the same thing that was going on in the 1800s, 1700s with black people, black Americans, my family. Um, I have a Native American ancestor, like Native American. Even though I feel that black people are still indigenous to this country, but I have actual Native American ancestor that was in my family tree. He was a slave. They don't know where he came from, and so what? And I also have a white female ancestor that she married into the family. She was already a slave, and no one knows where she came from. What I'm seeing here is that people were selling their children into slavery because they could not afford to live. This is what happened. Slavery was not because of race. It was because of poverty. You had the colonization coming to the United States, and they changed the entire system. You had a land of people who were sharing land, and they started dividing up land, and they started making rules, and they started making a monetary system, and they said, you can't afford to be here, you can't be a part of the system. You either work for us or you get into the system. They changed the entire system. So yes, okay, white folk bad, okay, all right. But there were still white people who were becoming victims of that same system. There was Native Americans who were becoming victims of the system, and there was black people who were becoming victims of the systems, only because it wasn't a system of what color were you. It was a system of how much money did you have and how much power did you have. And if you didn't have that power, black, Latino women, you still became a victim of that system. You're still a slave to that system. And that's what a lot of people don't understand, because it's not put out in the forefront. It's put on the forefront with black Americans because we were the majority at that time. And so it was like, oh, look at all these black people who are slaves to the system, because a lot of us, most of us were indigenous to this land, and we didn't care about that system. We didn't have the money, but they started having money. They created their monetary system. They started dividing up the land. The whole sharecropper history was that it was a mostly kind of like a socialistic society where, not that I believe in socialism, but there was just, everybody was just kind of farming together and picking what they could, until people just said, hey, you know what, this is my land, this is your land, and this is not California or Texas. Anywho, but what I'm trying to say here basically is that in my own family there are many races that were enslaved, and mostly because they were impoverished. Like, people were selling children. If you had a children out of wedlock, you did not want that to be known, you throw them into slavery. This is where you get the whole white trash ideology coming from, is because they would throw away their children and they will put them into, you know, uh, wherever the black folks was living, the slave black folks were living that didn't have money, they would dump them there, and those children would be slaves. That's what I can only assume, that because where is this history coming from? Where are these children, white kids in the slave camps with black people? You know, and a lot of people, oh, you're mixed, or you got white heritage because slave master rape. No, because slave master, somebody's slave master, or some white folk didn't want to have a child out of wedlock, and instead of abortion or adoption, they just threw their child away and left them on the slave grounds, and she was raised with everybody else. That's my family history. So that's what I'm trying to say, is that everybody was enslaved, and it was a crazy system of poverty, and it still exists today. If you really look at it, it still exists today with everybody. And it wasn't like Roots. Roots is a fictional story. It is a fictional story that someone created. Okay, so you need to actually ask your family what happened in your family when it comes to the 1800s, 1900s. If nobody knows, I'm sorry, but like I said, talk to somebody. Get your family history. Talk to them what happened and remember it. Write it down, okay?